Hi everybody, welcome to another makeover. This dresser is probably the first dresser when the before of it looks better in the video than in reality. My camera added some contrast and you can actually see the wood pattern, which in reality it was hard to see. It's a solid wood dresser with veneer over the solid wood, and it's hard to say what kind of veneer it is because it's hidden under those multiple layers of yellowish toner. That's what I thought. I thought if I stripped the old top coat and the toner, I would find that beautiful wood grain, hopefully walnut, with gorgeous book matching veneer pattern. The dresser itself was in pretty good shape. There were a couple of scratches on the top and some scratches on the drawers. Nothing too dramatic, so my plan was to restore that piece and apply a new top coat without using any toner. As usual, I started with the scraper, but the old finish didn't want to come off. It seemed very thin, that means I was wrong about multiple layers of toner and lacquer. It looked like stained shellac was used on this dresser and they applied 2 or 3 coats of it only. Normally I would use a stripper, but because like I said the top coat seems pretty thin, I decided to try sanding with 120 grit sandpaper. It did go okay, but in some areas the top coat was much thicker and it took me longer than I expected. That's why I started stripping. Because it was a shellac, instead of using my chemical stripper, I used some methyl hydrate. Methyl hydrate works with shellac the same way as denaturated alcohol. It dissolves shellac and it doesn't have a strong smell. I also stripped all 6 drawers, but this time I used my chemical stripper because, true story, I'm lazy. I was almost out of my methyl hydrate. I didn't have enough to strip all 6 drawers, and I didn't want to go to the store just for methyl hydrate. So I used leftovers of methyl hydrate to wash my drawers after stripping. And then I sanded everything with 150 grit sandpaper. Here you can see me sanding the drawers, and the top I sanded off camera. While I was sanding and stripping, I realized the veneer that was used on this dresser wasn't a walnut veneer. My guess it was either sapling or Idigbo veneer. The wood grain of this veneer was very inconsistent, and I could understand why they used toner on this veneer. I didn't have toner, but I hoped for the best and kept working. There were 2 big scratches on the top that I was kind of worried about, but I was able to steam them out using my iron and a damp cloth. Then I sanded the whole top with 220 grit sandpaper. And sorry for the footage, I moved the tripod by accident while I was sanding and I didn't notice that. To get rid of invisible for everybody but super visible for me swivel marks, I hand sanded the top with 220 again. Then I sanded the edges of the top and I found out that there was no edge banding. It wasn't a high-end piece of furniture, but even for the cheaper piece, it was kind of weird because usually there is a edge banding, always. There were still some dents and scratches on the drawers after first sanding, so I repeated the same step with the drawers I did with the top with iron, and then I sanded with 220 grit. While I was sanding, I found out that the joints almost on every drawer were loose. So I disassembled the joints, I squeezed some glue in there, and then I clamped them and let them dry for about 2 hours. Oh, and have you heard that story about the girl? She was working on the dresser, not the same one of course, but pretty similar. And she found out that the veneer on the drawers was kind of not a good quality veneer. Because of discoloration on the veneer, the drawers after sanding, they kind of looked dirty. And she knew that the only way to fix that was to use the toner. She didn't have one and she didn't want to buy it because she didn't like the look of this dresser with the toner. But she was so stubborn and she spent hours trying to stain the drawers. Then she sanded them because she didn't like the result. Then she was trying to use a whitewash. They still look dirty. Then she used different type of stain. Then she used the whitewash oil on top of it. And she even sealed the drawers with some Otis oil because she thought, oh my gosh, that's it, I did it. But when she pulled drawers back into the dresser, they still looked dirty, like this. What a crazy girlie. I would never ever do that. I would go with the plan B right away. My plan B was to do a paint and wood combo. And I've been wanting to try one idea for a while, but I couldn't find the right dresser. And because my plan A with the restoration didn't work out, I decided why not. There were a bit of discoloration on the top of the dresser, but overall it looked okay. So I kept it wooden and I only added a paint wash, white paint wash. Before painting, I primed the piece with Kiehl's primer to prevent any bleed-through situation and for better adhesion. And if you're thinking right now, what a weird way to apply the primer, yes, you're right. I told you that I'm lazy. I just didn't want to pour the primer into a different container and then just use a roller. Instead, I primed it right from the can. It's not the right way to do that, and I usually don't do that, but this time I did. I had some leftovers of different types of paint on hand, so I used them to create a custom mix color. I wanted that coffee with milk kind of color, so I mixed together some white paint, a little bit of green, a little bit of gray. I added some dusty rose color, and I got it. Before I started painting, I scuffed the surface with 320 grit sanding pad just to smooth it out. Before I started working with the drawers and bringing my idea to life, I sealed the top of the dresser. The top coat I was going to use needed 24 hours to dry, and I didn't want to waste that waiting time. I used Rubio Monocoat, and it was the first time I used that product. It's kind of expensive. I paid 92 Canadian dollars for 350 milliliters of that top coat. There's two parts, the oil and the activator, and you gotta mix them in 3-to-1 ratio. I mixed 3 teaspoons of part A and 1 teaspoon of part B, and that amount of oil was enough to seal the whole top of the dresser, and I even had some oil left. So the coverage was pretty good and I liked how it turned out, and I liked the smell in the morning because when I applied the smell was like something, and it turned out like kind of cherry smell. I don't know, maybe it's just my nose. I applied only one coat of Rubio Monocoat because I was going to apply some hard wax oil on top of it. The only negative I can find is you have to mix two parts together and then you have, I believe, 4 hours to work with. And if you mix more than you needed, it's just a wasting of that expensive product. Because my drawers were sealed with some finishing oil, I had to clean them first with a TSP degreaser. Then I wiped them with some methyl hydrate and then I sanded them off camera with 220 grit sandpaper. And here goes the fun part. I drew and I cut this stencil. I did it all by hand. And I didn't film it because I drew it while I was watching TV and relaxing in the evening. I taped the drawers and then I transferred the stencil onto them. And then I cut out the parts I wanted to be painted. And the idea wasn't to have a drawing over the wooden drawers, but opposite, to have a wooden sketch on painted drawers. For better adhesion, first I primed all drawers with Kiehl's Heavy Duty Primer. And then I applied 2 coats of my custom mix paint. I let the paint dry over the night and in the morning I took off the tape. And I liked how it was turning out and I was pleasantly surprised with the tape. Usually I seal the edges of the tape with some clear top coat, but there was a new tape I bought and I decided to test it. I have tried different types of the tape before for my makeovers, And I found out that the Scotch blue tape was a good solution, but it wasn't great. I kind of like frog tape, but Scotch tape did the same job and it was a little bit less expensive. This time I bought Scotch purple tape. I call it sensitive tape because you can use it over painted surfaces. This is the same type as frog yellow tape, but for me, this tape worked better. And it's less expensive. I'm not sponsored, but if you're looking for tape, I would definitely recommend that one. And I have another interesting story for you here. It's about the girl, not the same girl I told you about, it's totally different person, totally. She did nice paint job on her drawers and then she realized that she didn't like the hardware. She wanted to change it. So she cut some plugs for the old holes, then she used some wood filler, and then she tried to hide those repairs, but on some drawers they were still visible because if you want to fix something like old hardware holes, you gotta do it before you paint. Or you gotta send down your paint job and start over again. But the problem was the girl didn't have enough paint. And there was no chance that she could make one more batch in the same color, exactly the same shade. Girl, what were you thinking? And we're almost at the finish line here, but first I gotta deal with those legs. As you can see, one of the legs looks kinda interesting. And one more interesting thing, when I was trying to unscrew them, I realized that the screws stay in their places and the legs just coming off the screw. Weird legs, missing edge banding. Those things make me think that this dresser has been refinished, at least once. My plan was to keep legs bare wood, so I sanded it with 220 grit sandpaper. The legs were made out of maple, so to match the color I stained them with early American wood stain. And with the same color I stained the edges of the top. The veneer on the top turned out a bit darker than the veneer on the drawers. To make the top lighter, I applied hard wax white oil. Actually, I bought that oil by accident. I meant to buy a clear one, but the assistant came to me and we started chatting and I picked the wrong one. And I didn't realize that there was wrong one until I actually opened it. So now I have another option if I want to do a whitewash. Every paint I mixed for my custom color had built-in top coat, but just in case for additional protection, I sealed my painted parts with some poly. It's an oil-based wipe-on poly, and I know that it could give a yellowish shade to the paint, but in this case, that was exactly what I wanted to. I spread my new hardware and the caps for the legs with some gold tone lacquer, and because one cap was missing, I only used 2 of them for the front legs. The back legs, I sanded smooth and I kept them bare wood. At first, my original plan was to keep an original hardware. And then, when I realized that it's way too bulky for those drawers, I decided to go with some knobs. But I couldn't hide those previous holes properly. Because like I said, I didn't have enough paint, which I needed to, because if I wanted to repair those holes properly, I had to sand a lot of paint, then put some Bondo, then sand it again, and then apply new coats of paint, which I didn't have. And I didn't want to start over with this dresser again, so I decided to go for another drawers handles. They look kind of elegant and smaller, and I could hide those old holes behind them. The final step, I attached the legs and we're done here. Let me remind you what I started working with, and here's the final results. You see those spools on the top drawers? That's what I wanted for the other drawers, but I couldn't hide the holes. Anyways, I personally like how this dresser turned out. As usual, let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, that's free for you and means a lot to me. Thank you so much for watching and see you next Thursday.